the latest zombie apocalypse movie of 2024, has been released. For those who love zombie movies, this is a must-watch. Mantle has just woken up. The news is reporting about a new virus. Since there is no effective treatment yet, many areas around the world are experiencing uncontrollable situations. Mantle is already used to this. He feels like these viruses are very far away from him. Until the afternoon, when he goes to the supermarket, he notices that there are a lot more people shopping to stock up. It seems that the fear of the new virus strain is spreading, but Mantle doesn't follow the crowd. He grabs a bag of cat food and heads home. The news keeps delivering new updates about the domestic outbreak. 2 infected people have already been discovered. In the evening, as usual, Mantle video calls his sister. His sister suddenly looks very serious. She just received a notice that tonight she'll board a private plane to the Canary Islands. Because her husband works in the military, the government has chosen an island as a refuge for their families. She's just worried that Mantle will be lonely by himself. So, she hopes that Mantle can catch a plane there tomorrow. Mantle couldn't sleep the whole night. He used to have a perfect, happy family, but a sudden traffic accident took his wife's life. If it wasn't for the rescue helicopter at the hospital, Mantle might have been lost in that accident too. After recovering and being discharged from the hospital, his family was left with just a cat. This time, going to the Canary Islands for refuge. Of course, he can't leave the cat behind. The radio is delivering the latest news. A new mutation of the virus has appeared. The incubation period has been shortened. From infection to symptoms, it only takes a few minutes. Mantle and his cat go to the check-in desk. But while they're having their tickets checked, the screen suddenly displays that all flights are suspended. Then everyone's phones start ringing. It turns out the government has sent out a warning message, declaring that the country has entered an emergency state. A passenger suddenly goes crazy, breaking through the check-in gate. When the security guard tried to intervene, the passenger stole his gun. At this moment, everyone panicked. They quickly ran out of the airport lobby. Mantle followed the crowd running outside, but he was soon stuck on his way home. Both the roads in and out of the city were severely jammed. The roads leading in and out of the city were completely gridlocked. The longer Mantle waited, the more anxious he became. Knowing that the road wouldn't clear up anytime soon, he decided to park his car by the roadside and walked home with his cat. As night fell, Mantle got closer to his neighborhood. An ambulance drove by him, and he turned his head to watch it. He saw that his neighbor's house was surrounded by soldiers. A quarantine path led straight to the house. Mantle wondered what was going on. Soon he saw his neighbor going crazy, being dragged away by 2 soldiers. When Mantle returned home, he couldn't calm down. He hadn't expected that the terrifying virus would arrive so quickly. He couldn't believe it. The virus was here faster than he'd ever imagined. He drifted off to sleep, restless until morning, when his sister's phone call woke him up. By then, she had arrived at the Canary Islands. She shared some news with Mantle, revealing that the government, in an effort to control the outbreak, had decided to set up quarantine zones to gather people in one place. However, many in the military opposed this idea, since crowded places were even more dangerous. She advised her brother to stay home no matter what. After hanging up the phone, Mantle decided to visit the supermarket to buy some essential supplies. But he wasn't the only one with this idea. The shelves were already stripped bare. After a lot of effort, he managed to grab a few cans of food. As he noticed fighter jets flying by, Mantle hurriedly ran to a nearby gas station. The shop there had been closed for a few days, but there were still some supplies inside. Just as he finished gathering supplies, a wounded store clerk rushed in. Ignoring everything, the clerk locked himself inside the store. Then more people arrived, shouting and running. Suddenly, someone charged from nowhere, knocking down the police behind him. Instinctively, Mantle ran to stop him. He picked up a water pipe, and the man started running toward him. Suddenly, a gunshot sounded from behind. The police had just shot him. By now, the store clerk inside the store had also turned into a zombie. Mantle realized the world was changing too fast. He grabbed his bag of supplies and hurried away. Once he returned home, he followed his sister's advice and reinforced his house inside and out. He even set up surveillance equipment at the front door. That night, a group of soldiers arrived in his neighborhood. Knocking on each door, they began organizing the residents for relocation. Assigned for quarantine, Mantle and his cat lay still on the floor, ignoring the soldiers knocking on the door outside, until they got tired and moved on to the next house. 2 weeks passed in a flash. With the help of solar batteries, Mantle barely survived for 2 weeks. But he had run out of food at home, and was forced to go out to find food. Mantle used to love diving, and once again he made use of his diving gear. After putting on his diving suit, he reinforced his arms and legs, so that even if he encountered the infected, he could still fight them. But after searching several neighboring houses, Mantle still found nothing, until he entered a house with an open door, where he met an elderly lady, who was paralyzed from the waist down. Her daughter had gotten married, and during the evacuation, no one noticed her. Mantle felt sorry for the old lady, but he didn't have much food left to share. The old lady laughed. She knew the area well, and finally guided Mantle to find plenty of food, and even a motorcycle he liked, so he could travel farther to gather supplies. Their lives gradually stabilized. Mantle thought it was truly wonderful to have someone with him. He hoped they could live like this until the epidemic ended. One evening, the old lady told Mantle to turn on the radio, where they heard a woman's voice. She said the government-established quarantine area was out of control. If there were any survivors, they could go to the Arousa estuary, and she would ferry them to the Canary Islands. Mantle was thrilled to hear this. Wasn't that where his sister had gone for refuge? He decided to take the old lady to the estuary the next day, but she refused, citing her inability to walk due to her paralysis. Mantle sincerely told her he wouldn't abandon a teammate. Early the next morning, he packed everything up, ready to inform the old lady, but after waiting, there was no response on the other end of the radio. Mantle immediately sensed something was wrong. He rushed to her house and found a note on the table. "I hope you live well." She was gone. She didn't want to become a burden to Mantle. Mantle felt heartbroken, and on his way back, distracted, he was knocked down by an infected person. Mantle struggled with all his might, opened the car door to fend off his attacker. When the infected lunged at him again, he quickly grabbed a spear gun and fired a shot. Back at home, he cleaned the arrow, ensuring he had all the essentials packed. Mantle rode his motorcycle toward the Arousa estuary. On the way, he stopped by the nearest quarantine zone. Though the barricades were still up, the temporary tents were in shambles. What he had heard on the radio was true. Mantle had no choice but to head for the Canary Islands. As he passed through a narrow road between two mountains, a large group of infected suddenly emerged. Mantle accelerated, sweat soaking his back. He unwittingly reached a temporary quarantine camp. Mantle decided to take the risk and dash through. Unexpectedly, from the tents came a horde of infected. Terrified, Mantle staggered out of the quarantine area. Ahead, he saw a pile of bodies. Frightened, Mantle tripped and fell to the ground. As the infected closed in, his motorcycle refused to start. Out of options, he abandoned it and ran for his life. Luckily, the estuary was nearby. Carrying his cat, he ran as fast as he could. He finally reached the estuary first, but the glass doors were fragile. They were quickly shattered by the raging infected. Mantle dashed through the safety doors, finally losing the zombies behind him. There was no joy for Mantle. There were many boats at the estuary, but not a single person in sight. He wondered if the kind voice on the radio had just left, or had become infected. Mantle had no time to think further, quickly finding a speedboat, and headed toward the Canary Islands. Along the way, he encountered many capsized boats. He could hardly imagine what they had gone through. Suddenly, the speedboat stopped. Mantle lifted the oar from the water. Realizing it was caught on a body, Mantle felt hopeless. Would he be stranded and die at sea? Unexpectedly, a large ship approached from behind. Mantle waved excitedly. Before long, he was taken aboard. To his surprise, the crew was foreign. They communicated through a translator. After answering many strange questions, Mantle was escorted to the lounge by the translator. Curious, he wondered why he hadn't seen any other survivors. The translator's expression immediately changed. He told Mantle that he was the first. Unexpectedly that night, Mantle saw a family arrive on a small boat, seeking help. The next morning, he asked the translator, Victor, if they had rescued them. Victor told him not to ask questions. Curious, Mantle went to the bow of the ship alone. He saw the small boat from the night before had been brought on board, and a crew member was rummaging through their belongings. Mantle realized he was on a pirate ship. Mantle secretly approached Victor, guessing that Victor was also forced into this, and suggested they escape together. He knew of a hospital with a helicopter, and it turned out Victor was a pilot. They could fly to the Canary Islands for refuge. To his surprise, Victor bluntly refused, and warned Mantle to stay out of trouble if he wanted to survive. Mantle decided he would have to find a way to escape on his own. That night, he packed his belongings, preparing to leave the cabin. Suddenly, he remembered. People frequently entered and exited the white doored room during the day. Curious, Mantle sneaked inside. There, he saw the family from the previous night, but 2 female members were missing. He quickly approached to untie them. The man was crying, saying he wanted to save his wife and child, but he was shot dead by a guard shortly after. Mantle thought he was certain to die this time, when suddenly Victor arrived. The guard was unprepared, and was suddenly attacked. Mantle was in shock, surprised that Victor killed the guard. Victor had made up his mind, and wanted to escape with Mantle. Under the cover of darkness, the 2 of them went to the side of the ship, but as they got into the speedboat, they were spotted by a guard. Mantle immediately started the boat, while Victor shot back from behind. Unfortunately, he was hit in the arm. Thankfully, they were out of the firing range. Mantle docked the boat onshore, taking the injured Victor to a parking lot. After searching, they finally found a car that worked. Mantle drove Victor quickly to the hospital. Without treatment, Victor's injury would be fatal. They traveled down a desolate highway. Seeing the city lifeless from a distance, they finally reached the hospital, and Mantle grew anxious, because there was no helicopter at the helipad. At that moment, a large group of infected, hearing the noise, rushed toward Mantle, who, in frustration, fired repeatedly, taking them down. His chance to reunite with his sister seemed shattered. Mantle decided to treat Victor's wound first, and figure out the rest later. As he was preparing disinfectant, he suddenly heard children's voices coming from the ventilation shaft. Curious, Mantle followed the sound. Sure enough, he spotted 2 children inside a vent. But at that moment, an infected person approached from behind. Mantle turned around, and shot it with his spear gun. Unfortunately, he made too much noise, drawing a horde of infected toward him. Mantle hurriedly ran back to the operating room, only to find Victor was gone. As the infected broke down the door, a female doctor appeared in the ventilation duct. Mantle quickly climbed in, escaping the infected. In addition, there was a safe zone inside the hospital. The head doctor and staff had gathered children in hiding there. Victor had already been rescued and brought there. His injury was severe, and required immediate surgery. Not long after, Dr. Lucia successfully removed the bullet from Victor. Meanwhile, Mantle was curious. About the helicopter's whereabouts, Lucia took him to the rooftop, and explained that when not in use, the helicopter was stored at the hospital's back lot. Unfortunately, the exits were surrounded by zombies. Mantle didn't want to give up. He kept returning to the rooftop to scout the area. Then he noticed by chance that a group of armed men were entering below. He recognized them as the people from the ship. Mantle suggested they fly away in the helicopter immediately. Lucia quickly agreed, as their supplies were also running low. The group carefully made their way through the duct. Finding a locked door, Mantle grabbed an axe and broke the lock. But as soon as he opened the door, an infected person charged at them. The head doctor was knocked down. Everyone helped fend it off. But the doctor had been bitten. They could only watch as the doctor left them. Lucia was saddened but knew she had a greater duty. Not long after, she led everyone to the hospital's back exit. Through the window, they saw the area swarming with infected. Mantle came up with a bold idea. He arranged storage racks in a circle, shielding everyone inside. Halfway across, the infected spotted them. But, even as they charged at them, they couldn't reach those inside. Mantle kept fending off zombies trying to climb in, while pushing the metal racks forward. After a struggle, they reached the helicopter pad door. Lucia unlocked the door, letting everyone rush inside, leaving the metal racks blocking the entrance. Victor quickly climbed into the helicopter, and though Mantle had locked the door, the zombies started climbing over the barrier. Just then, as Mantle struggled against the zombie attack, the captain and his crew burst in, quickly shooting down the zombies at the door, and threatening Victor to leave the helicopter. Mantle discreetly signaled Victor, then broke the lock on the back door. A swarm of infected poured in, while Mantle hid behind the metal door. He waited until the captain's crew was overwhelmed. Victor managed to start the helicopter. By then, only a few infected remained. Mantle swung his axe to take down the last few, then grabbed the helicopter's metal chain. After a harrowing journey, they finally reached a new refuge. As they approached the Canary Islands, Mantle's phone regained signal, and he quickly received a call from his sister. To his surprise, she was in a panic, warning him not to come. The Canary Islands had also been overtaken by the infection. That's the full story of the movie, Apocalypse C, the beginning of the end. Did you enjoy the movie? If you did, please give me a subscribe. If you thought it was just okay, leave a comment. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, and see you next time.